Welcome to the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, where President and CEO founder Paul Stukel discusses middle market issues with business leaders from across the nation. Today, Paul continues his conversation with Kon Leoung, co-founder and CEO of ZL Technologies, about the power and pitfalls of big data in the corporation.
It's a double-edged sword. Now, with every great stride in technology, there comes a double-edged sword. It's like the invention of fire. You can use fire to do good, but it could also be devastating.
Yep.
I think we're at that crossroads.
Interesting.
You can make it do a lot of good, but there has to be checks and balances so that it's not abused.
So, in terms of the and again, you're right. It's all encompassing, but it intrigues me. The concept of applying those analytics to, as you say, know your employees, and again, there's a ton of privacy issues that sort of flow from that, as we've both alluded to. But the concept of quote unquote knowing your employees is something that not many people, if anybody, has really focused on, it seems to me, but it seems to me to be sort of pregnant with all kinds of possibilities that can be used for good. Sure,
yes,
as you say, it can be
absolutely.
used for bad as well. But certainly, and in fact, most of the focus, at least in my, in sort of my circles, has been on the negative. It's been, we can find out if people are cheating. We can find out if people are, scamming us. We can find out if they're not, our employees are not, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and instead are watching Oprah, during the middle of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. So there's that sort of negative feedback loop that can come from the analytics part. But the suggestion that there's a positive feedback loop there strikes me as being a concept that no one's really talking about. And I think that's one of the things that you seem to be touching upon.
Yes. For example, the simple act of answering the question, who is the expert in this? Unless you implement a huge system, very cumbersome, and have all the experts identified, and then they log on, and then register what they're expert in, and then constantly update their profile and allow access, it's just a nightmare. Here you have the expert network already built into all the communications.
Right.
In fact, you not only find out who the expert is, but go beyond the self-proclaimed expert to the real go-to experts by the pattern of communications. Whom are people asking? Really
right.
asking. And that's already built in. All you need to do is find the right query. So here's a classic case. It's simple and really brain-dead, but so powerful. Many large organizations have these legacy applications programmed when COBOL was the rage. And they've all they've all since gone away, retired, and no one knows how this darn application runs, but it runs. One fine day, it goes kaplunk, and people are scurrying around trying to figure out who's the expert in this. Well, this is what this system is meant for. With one scan, you can identify who are the top 5 or 7 experts, find out where they are, who they are, whom they work for, whether they're retired. And if they're retired, even if they're retired, you can go offer them a contract. It's a lot faster than hiring a consultant to come in and then go and spend months and months of time trying to decode the source code.
Right.
It's a waste of expertise.
And it's also a lot less expensive than hiring the consultant, certainly. Yeah.
And the shortest distance between 2 points, and there are thousands upon thousands of legacy applications out there.
Yeah. Well, and one can apply it, I think, to as I think was implied by one of our correspondences. It can also be applied to things like employee wellness, employee happiness, employee motivation, etc. I would think, in terms of identifying problem situations well before they blossom into real crises.
Yes, you can nip things in the bud. For example, getting taking a finger on the pulse of the organization today is only a term. It's an idiom, a phrase, a concept. But you can actually get to the finger on the pulse with this. For example, you can say, how's the organization feeling along these lines? We had a layoff last month. Has the dust settled, or should we still be worrying and doing damage control?
Right.
What are the top 10 trending topics being discussed?
Yep.
There are so many questions you want to ask just to get a finger on the pulse of the organization. How is morale? How is morale now? How is morale 6 months ago? How was morale a year ago? Are we trending up or trending down?
Right.
These are things the manager...
Yeah.
Sorry?
Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, these are things management would love to understand so they can be more effective. But to date, it's not been possible.
Yeah, it's done through focus groups more than anything else, right?
Yes, and focus groups are all filtered. Yes, they're all filtered.
Of course they are, because people are not speaking honestly typically in those focus groups, whether they claim to or not. And, of course, it's very cumbersome and limited in terms of statistical validity. So, yeah. I would think also that then in that, for a company that would apply this kind of analysis, obviously build the technological infrastructure, which let me back up a little minute. In terms of the technology infrastructure that is required to do this, is that nowadays, is that a cumbersome process? Because I'm thinking about this in terms of, because this is a very interesting conversation. I'm a CEO myself, and, I think of a CEO who is running a multi-location company that does $400 or $500 million in sales. They've got facilities, sort of 5 or 6 states. So, the guy at the helm it's very, very difficult for that guy to know, sort of in a granular sense what's really happening. And so they do rely on, quasi focus group type of activities. And that individual may say, look, this listening to you say, gosh, boy, I would love that information, but how do I do it? How difficult is it to do? How do I start? Is that a massive undertaking these days, Kon, or is that more of is it now with the advent of cloud and the obviously advanced technologies, or is that easier to do than one would think?
Well, I'll give you the good news, bad news mix. The good news is that you got to do it anyway, or else the bill or the damage or the cost will be even more, many times more, as we saw with the Samsung versus Apple patent lawsuit.
Yeah.
Samsung was badly affected by the inability to produce data that they should have preserved, and basically they said it got out of hand. They couldn't control it, and it was deleted. Well, all in all, that kind of adverse inference, they call it in court, where the jury is instructed that they must have something to hide. That kind of litigation handicap can cost you the entire case, in this case $1.2 billion.
Right.
So the cost of the system itself is somewhat fractional, very small compared to what would happen if you didn't. And litigation keeps raising the stakes higher and higher each day.
Sure.
The courts are getting more and more stringent on interpreting what's accessible data and what isn't. And technology, on the good news also, is ramping up tremendously in potency and reducing the associated costs, especially storage.
Right.
Having said that, though, the technology that you need to harness all of this massive amount of data is not trivial, and as such, caveat emptor. The user has to be careful to look very carefully that the technology can scale, because we're talking about stuff that's along Google-type volumes, and it's not trivial. Let me give you a sample data point. The U.S. Library of Congress has, 22 million books? At one customer site we have, at one point they were taking in 50 million documents every day. So that kind of gives you some sense. Yeah.
And that's not going to, that's going to grow exponentially. It almost has to, given the way the trends of the world are in terms of technology and communication. Yeah. So you're right. And even for a mid-sized company, no matter how you look at it, you're going to have massive amounts of data. Yeah. No, so it's a non-trivial exercise.
Right.
Which
so
then sort of. Go ahead.
Yeah, the user does have to be careful about doing their homework. Another data point is that when Google went IPO, that was the last published document, press release. They managed about 4.3 billion documents. Well, at one customer site, they're already exceeding 11 billion.
Wow. So that then leads to the second question that I had sort of blundered into previously, which is, one of obviously the cost-benefit analysis of pursuing something like this, it's the benefit side. There's some low-hanging fruit that we can all sort of intuitively grasp. But in terms of the really refining the benefits that one gets, in other words, getting the information that you truly need, as you say, it's all about the query, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that respect, I would think that linguistics, oddly enough, become a really, really important element of writing the right queries, right? Because if you're trying in all this unstructured data and all this unstructured communication, and I think we can all sort of, even the non-technologists among us, can grasp the concept of I've got a stack full of emails, pieces of paper. I've got a stack full of emails, and I'm trying to figure out a specific thing. Well, like you said, what's morale like? I can read them all, but in doing that, it'll take me too much time. So I'll probably scan them to look for specific words or specific phrases or specific subjects that relate to the information I'm trying to gather, right? So, but the key is knowing, and this is in a human mind, knowing what to look for. Now, obviously, from a technology perspective, you have to know what to look for. And therefore, you need to know what the right phrases are, what the right language is, what the right topics are. I would think that in itself is a pretty sophisticated activity.
Well, I have some very good news on that front. Ever since the passing of the rules of litigation, the FRCP in 2006, where in litigation, soft evidence was now treated the same as hard evidence. Ever since that seminal event in 2006, there's been a lot of research put into analytics, precisely to do what you're talking about. And technology has just burgeoned forth in this space, and it'll keep continuing to get better and better each year. Where we are today in unstructured or textual analytics is light years ahead of where we were in 2006. So expect a lot of news along those lines. Having said that, though, there are many, many approaches and techniques towards analyzing data like this. There is the lexical or linguistics or language-based, and there's the mathematical. And then there's in between and other flavors thrown in. If you think about it, this kind of analytics is similar to the area of the broad area of mathematics. To chart a trajectory to the moon, you have to have certain techniques like, obviously, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. But then you also have to get to differential calculus,
right,
and then integral calculus, and potentially add in all of the trigonometry that goes into it. So each segment or approach has a role to play in getting to the destination. It's not just one area of math fits all. So, for example, in the analytic space, you have latent semantic indexing, probabilistic latent semantic indexing, and then all the way up to the natural language processing techniques, which is short form NLP. And NLP is as complex and as nuanced as artificial intelligence. To get to the pinnacle of NLP will take another decade or two.
It serves me right for asking a question like that. It's like asking a physicist, to explain particle theory, right? Trying to use square blocks and round blocks, right? No, that's I understand exactly what you're saying.
But let me give you some examples of what's possible today.
Yeah.
It's where you say, find me coffee, but you can use pure mathematics to somehow corner that, extrapolate from there, and actually find latte and say, do you want latte too? Without knowing what the hell it means.
No,
and
I got you.
It's all a question of mathematical computations.
Yeah. It's the science behind this absolutely fascinating, and it brings in so many streams of science. I mean, as you said, sort of like on the mathematical example, everything from addition and subtraction to differential equations, and in this situation, you're bringing in all kinds of disciplines that are rather extraordinary in themselves. Mathematics, linguistics, statistical probability. All of those things really come into play, don't they? That's interesting.
I'll give you a moment of epiphany. Our CTO talked to me about using mathematics, just messing around with zeros and ones to get to what I thought was impossible unless you had some human logic behind that. So he putted around his computer, and then weeks later he came back to me and said, let's do a search for something. We were working with the Enron database. I did the search the normal way using Google-type keywords and so forth, with proximity and so forth. And that was all I could. I could only find a few dozen of relevant documents. And then he applied this mathematical stuff, and out popped dozens of other documents that I had totally missed, and it just floored me, and I said, God, that's like magic. And then I remembered that every great leap in technology does look like magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually, that's the best phrase for it. I mean, I can't remember who else. Some eminent person had said something to that effect. I mean, if people from 200 years ago looked at the way we lived, they'd think this was all magic. And it's true. It's absolutely true. When you really think about it, it's true.
Be sure to check back for future episodes of President and CEO's Focus on the Middle Market podcast series. Thanks for listening.